I think the process has been very good. If you recall the very rapid original strategy, again, the objective was to conduct a review and to put the resulting strategy in place before the NATO summit that was going to take place. I think it was in April, so this was announced in very late March of this year. That's quite fast, given the administration only took over back in 20th of January. Now, at the same time, we were also doing the Iraq review. Strategy was announced, and of course there were a number of other issues out there, not the least of which were the economy, and so forth. So that process we thought was very good. Bruce Riddell, who led that, a 30-year CIA veteran, very respected, I think, at Brookings, is he not? So he's got to be a good guy. And he did a very good job leading this. I was a participant in that. Ambassador Richard Holbrooke, diplomatic wingman for Afghanistan and Pakistan, was a key participant. A number of others, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Michelle Flournoy. And again, good outcome, but not an enormous amount of time to engage the President during that process. And certainly not the opportunity to engage him the way this process has enabled over the course of the last 2 months. 8 meetings now with the President alone. Each one of those preceded typically by a PC, a Principals Committee meeting that includes all of the participants of the meetings that he is in, with the exception, obviously, him. So it has a Vice President, all of the other Secretaries of State, Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Central Command, General McChrystal, Ambassador Eikenberry, Ambassador Patterson in Pakistan, and all of the other principals. Those have been very good. And even before those, sometimes deputies committee meetings, the deputy level to each of those participating as well. There has been very good debate, very good discussion for folks who had the opportunity to go to grad school, if you will. I mean, this is the kind of intellectual discourse that you want. It does sharpen your thinking. It does expose differences of opinion. It helps you come to grips with what the assumptions were that undergirded what it is you're doing, to re-examine the fundamental objectives of what you're trying to accomplish, and all the rest of this. And I think this process has enabled exactly that. I mean, I'm not sure about the history of this kind of process, but it seems to me that when the President devotes 2.5 hours almost per session, sometimes it's been longer, but on average, and over the course of 8 sessions, that is an extraordinary commitment of time by the Commander-in-Chief. I think it's an appropriate commitment. Our understanding is that the decision will be forthcoming pretty soon, perhaps when he gets back from the Asia trip that he's on right now, and then we'll all press forward. And I think we will do so with enormous benefit from having had these discussions that have, again, enabled all different participants to provide their thoughts, to answer a host of questions, all of which are appropriate, before the President announces a decision that could affect men and women in uniform. Substantial sums of money, civilian members of government who are partnering, of course, with the military forces, our international partners, and obviously people.
Ask one last question about Afghanistan, then we'll have a short question about Pakistan and turn to the audience for the remaining half hour or so. But on Afghanistan, of course, a big part of the debate right now is how do we gain influence with President Karzai, who has been reported to have a number of associates that perhaps he would be better off distancing himself from, who leads a government that is seen by many as too corrupt, and therefore not gaining legitimacy among the population, and therefore sometimes helping the insurgency in its recruiting efforts, to be blunt, because they tap into the disaffection among especially certain tribes, certain groups. To the extent that's a fair description of some of our current thinking and our challenge, I guess you got a little. There's nothing about the Navy V Army that they stuck on your shoulder. I was watching carefully.
It's just booby trap there, I think.
To the extent that corruption is a big problem, let me just quickly say I was encouraged last week in my visit to see how much we're trying to tackle corruption at the working level by, for example, police reform. And I won't go into detail on that, but of course you helped preside over that and encourage that in Iraq, where the national police reformed itself. Trying some similar things now with the Afghan police. This gave me a bit more hopefulness. And of course the police are led by Minister of Interior Atmar, who's a pretty good guy. Put all the pieces together on the anti-corruption front. Do you see hope there in terms of our dealings with the Afghan partner that we so desperately need?
Well, I think, first of all, that we have heard President Karzai address this problem. And I think he has perhaps also rightly noted that, we've all got to work together on it. We have to make sure that the way we spend money doesn't encourage or facilitate some of the problems that do exist. But there's no question that this has to start at the top. And in fact, I think he has set that tone. It'll be very important to hear what he says in his inauguration address. I think there are several subjects that will be very critical during that address that we look forward to hearing. His plans to deal with the corruption, to confront the issues that have to do with legitimacy of governance and how to achieve that in the eyes of the people, to be seen as serving the people rather than what some allege in certain areas are more predatory forms of government. And then beyond that, certainly the whole ownership, if you will, of the security situation over time and the kinds of tone, I think, that he is going to set also with his ministerial appointments and so forth. You mentioned Minister Atmar. There are a number of actually very fine ministers in the Afghan government. I think that over the past year or so, one of the highlights has been the replacement of some of the less effective ministers with individuals who are really quite effective: Minister of Finance, Minister of Defense, and a host of others. And now I think we will see how are those ministers enabled, strengthened, supported. President Karzai, in the last time I saw him when I was in Afghanistan a couple of weeks ago, reaffirmed that Minister Atmar, for example, has a blank check when it comes to combating corruption. That's a pretty significant commitment. So we will be working, partnering with Minister Atmar, with judicial authorities, with other members of the government, of course, our civilian elements taking the lead in that, and our international partners very heavily involved in it. But those are very important elements of any comprehensive counterinsurgency campaign, any campaign that is seeking to secure and serve the people and to gain the support of the people, and therefore the rejection of alternative forms of governance, one of which is presented by the Taliban.
As you say, that's realistic and also somewhat more encouraging, so I appreciate elements of hopefulness even as you face